It's July 7th, 2024. I'm with Mr. John Jeckovich, and we're reading a book, Their Mother's Sons, and we're on chapter 7, and we're on page 180, and this is segment 2 for today, and it's titled Overseas and Beyond. Overseas and Beyond. With more than satisfactory meals, coupled with adequate sleeping quarters, the shower facilities, we all felt that we were perfectly content to spend the rest of the war right here. That would not be the case, nor would be a good deal like this to last too long. I would think of Anne as we marched to chow, and she seemed a million miles away, as if we're on a different planet. I decided to write a letter later that day and try to convey my feelings to her, knowing that the Army censor would be reading every word I wrote. That afternoon, we received some of our small arms, M1 rifles, carbines, and a 45 Colt pistol. Did you get a 45 Colt pistol?
If you carried part of a tank or part of a machine gun, yeah.
And you had a 45?
Well, I had that, and I had a carbine.
Did you ever use the 45?
No, I rather depend on the carbine.
45s weren't accurate.
Yeah.
Did Lape use the 45 a lot?
Who?
Lape.
No. I don't even think he had one.
All preserved in cosmoline and wrapped in waterproof paper. An area several buildings down from the quarters was utilized as an armament stable, and it was there that we prepared the weapons that we would use in combat. All the weapons had to be stripped down and removed all
that cosmoline out of grease and stuff, black, brown, little like tar.
Did the cosmoline was like Vaseline?
Yeah, it protected it from rusting.
How long does it take to clean it off?
Well, you had to take a strip them down, get the chambers out, everything out of the gun.
So when the factory makes millions of these guns, 45s and carbines, they completely coat them with cosmoline.
Yeah.
And it's up to
they were shipped overseas, yeah.
And it's up to the soldier to put them in order by cleaning them.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. All the weapons that we had to use in combat, we had to remove all the traces of the cosmoline to function properly. We later learned that firing range was accessible.
What was accessible?
The firing range, so you could test your weapons after you clean them.
Mm-hmm.
It would afford us the opportunity to familiarize ourselves with our individual weapons and to zero them in for pinpoint accuracy. This we did for the next several days. The weather was mild, 50 to 60 degrees during the day, and at night it would drop down to 35 to 40 degree range. The sun was never in abundance, as most of the days were overcast, with low-lying cumulus clouds lingering about. Rain was also a constant factor to reckon with on a daily basis, for when it rained it came down in buckets, usually 1 to 3 inches at a time. Thank goodness for our hotel billets stayed dry during the day, and we're thankful for that. Along with the issue of weapons, we were also supplied with numerous clothing rations, including 2 pairs of wool gloves, mitted and fingered, along with long johns and long-sleeve undershirts, 6 pairs of wool socks, and an extra pair of combat boots, a pair of 4-buckle galoshes. How were those 4-buckle galoshes?
Well, you had the same things at home.
You mean when you went to school, you had the same black boot?
Yeah. But that was the beginning. They gave us the good boots. They
didn't do good in the snow.
Yeah, huh?
They didn't do good in the snow.
What?
The buckled galoshes weren't a good boot to keep you warm in the snow.
Not those, but not with the buckles. No. The other ones were one solid piece.
And a double wool blanket.
Waterproof too.
A double wool blanket sleeping bag with their names and serial numbers stenciled on the outer cover. Did you use your sleeping bag much?
Oh yeah.
Did you go all the way in it?
No, you couldn't sleep in a sleeping bag. We were out in the combat zone. You sleep in a sleeping bag, and they shoot you before you got out.
So where'd you sleep, on top of it or under it?
Lay down and put it on top of it, folded.
So did all the other soldiers not sleep in the sleeping bag?
No, you're in a sleeping bag. You're tied down.
And so there's a good chance of getting killed if you slept.
Either freeze to death or stay awake, or you'll be alive.
In addition to the above-mentioned issue, we also received extra shorts, handkerchiefs, and an extra pair of ODs and fatigues. We also were issued new webbing, pistol and cartridge trench knives, shelter half, and full field pack and raincoat and poncho. Did you use the raincoat and poncho?
Oh yeah.
That was a good item to have.
Well, we use the poncho, lay on the ground for a cover, then lay on
How
top
about
of
the
it.
trench knife?
Huh?
How about the trench knife?
Trench knife, that goes on your belt.
Did you use it much?
I didn't use it on anybody, no.
When most of the snow during the Battle of Bulge was covered on the ground, and most of the ground was frozen solid, which a shovel couldn't pierce, how'd you make a foxhole? How'd you make a trench?
You didn't do them so well.
How would you attempt to do it?
Well, you started it, but you get exhausted before you got it down to a half inch.
So where'd you stay instead of?
Well, we got someplace where the bushes were trees, and that used the trees and bushes as cover.
So not many foxholes or trenches were built.
Oh yeah, no, you couldn't. It was ground was too frozen.
The ground was like cement.
And I would never get in the foxhole there if the troops, if the combat, if the enemy is near, because you're like just in the house.
Yeah. And then what type of bushes? Would you see like a big tree? You would.
They had those. They sent tanks in with shear cutters on the front to cut those bushes down. But they're funny. They had prickles on the end of them.
Like thorns.
Yeah.
And so what happened?
Well, they sent them in. They cut them down and they sheared them down. The bulldozer come in and picked them up and threw them out someplace else.
So who did that? The Americans?
Yeah, Americans. Yeah.
So where did you stay if the bushes were gone?
What?
I thought you said you stood under bushes during the war, because.
That was in the woods.
Oh, the woods. So what would be the typical type of place you'd stay at in the woods?
In the woods, yeah.
What was a typical place? Describe it to us.
The second old place was probably an old barn.
Did you have a run-in with Patton in the barn one night?
The what?
Didn't you have a run-in with General Patton one night?
Yeah, he ran it out. He got us. Kept posted camouflage that truck, that Jeep, Patton called us up. He said, "What the hell are you guys doing in here? Get the hell out of here." It was pouring rain that night.
And where did Patton go?
He went up checkpoint 1 up there, and he said, "You get it the hell up here. I want you in here in 10 minutes."
So General Patton was very active during the war.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like some of the top brass that just stayed back.
Yeah, they were back in the office.
Not Patton.
No.
That's amazing. Our helmet liners had our last names stenciled on the front, but our steel helmets were left untouched, with the exception of an officer's who had a narrow white band painted on the rear of theirs. Our Form 20s were reviewed, shots brought up to date, and allotments, if any, received and changed, if so desired, as well as our insurance beneficiaries and notice of kin. All this was taken care of within a few days after arrival in the theater. It was an eerie but necessary task. Also during our brief stay at Wales, our TO, Table of Organization, was brought up to where it should be several months ago. Captain Droulard was still the company commander, CO, and Sergeant Whalen was still the first sergeant, and Sergeant Rupert was our platoon sergeant. We still had no platoon leader, and even though Fink had been squad leader before we left the States, he had not received his sergeant stripes. Weren't you supposed to get sergeant stripes?
What?
Weren't you supposed to get stripes?
Yeah, well, they never gave them out.
Weren't you told on 3 or 4 occasions that you're supposed to have stripes and then you're passed by?
What?
Weren't you told on 3 or 4 separate occasions that you were to get stripes, but then later you were passed by or forgot about?
They weren't what?
Weren't you supposed to get stripes?
Yeah, but then what happened?
They passed by or forgot about, or whoever told you they got killed.
They were giving stripes out to the back of rear echelon. The Army gave them so many stripes, and they gave out to somebody else that we wouldn't get them.
So it was the back echelon they got the stripes.
Oh yeah.
And was the back echelon ever in combat?
No, they were stationed behind us, and we were heavy weapons. We were stationed behind the infantry.
Infantry and heavy weapons.
Yeah. Which was only 3 or 4 miles away from them.
Wow. I was first gunner. Lape was assistant gunner. Varilla and Jensen were ammo bearers, with the rest of the squad to be filled in a later date. All in all, we were still approximately 10 to 15 men under strength in that platoon, and I hoped our remaining days would bring up the strength. After the first week, once again, we fell into a routine of sorts, much unlike anything we have experienced back in the States. In the States, we were isolated. Here, we're in the center of town, in the midst of civilians, living in the very same town they occupied. How did the civilians in Wales treat the American soldier?
Well, depending where they were. If they were in France or...
No, you were in Wales.
That's the name
living
of
in
it.
the center of the town. How did the townspeople treat the American soldier?
Oh, they liked us. Well, we almost saved their country.
So you were well accepted.
Yeah.
Well accepted.
They were accepted.
Yeah. After the first week, once again, we fell into routine of sorts, much unlike anything we experienced in the States. In the States, we were isolated. Here we're in the center of town, in the midst of civilians, living in the very same town occupied by them. As such, there was not much complaining, as everyone in the back of their minds could relate to much more trying and devastating circumstances in the future. I pulled fire watch the 3rd day, and we were in our billets, and subsequently, twice a month, twice more before we left. There was nothing more than monitoring and tendering to the fireplace in the various rooms in the building. How many fireplaces were in the building?
Well, there were long buildings, wooden buildings, and there were little stoves in the outways.
And what were they on, wood or coal?
They got wood, and they got a lot of small pea coal. They got the wood fire going, and they put pea coal. It lasted a little longer, but you had to be on the watch all night.
So you had to watch for a fire watch a few nights.
Yeah.
And did you have to also keep the fireplace going?
Oh yeah, you fed it, yeah.
Did it throw out a nice heat? Did it throw off a nice heat?
What?
Did it throw off a nice size heat? Was it?
No.
Not at all. Okay.
The area is too big.
It was much similar to guard duty, as we had 2 hours on and 2 hours off, sleep or whatever it was during the nighttime. As the men slept, I usually got 200 to 400 hour tours and then off the rest of the detail. What entailed was checking the fireplaces on the ground floor, which numbered about 10 fireplaces, seeing that there were no fire hazards about and generally keeping the coals burning until morning. No fireplaces were active during the daylight hours unless there was someone in constant attendance due to the condition of the wooden buildings and their close proximity to one another. The imminent danger of the fire was uppermost in everyone's mind. Luckily, we went through our stay at the billets without a single incident of fire. So those wooden buildings were so old. If
Yeah,
one caught,
they're real dry. They're real
they all
dry.
go up very quickly, right?
Yeah.
Wow. How old would you say those buildings were?
What?
How old were those buildings?
Probably 50 years old.
Wow. So that wood was dry, huh?
Yeah. Windows are all shot.
Blacked out?
Yeah.
It's over. Yeah. Good night.
Good night, ladies. How was the movie?
Wonderful. It was very lightning, sad. Very, very sad. But it's a true story. That's what was so good.
You're looking well. Take care. Good night, Harriet. Good night, Harriet.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sheridan looked over the dining room.
What is that? Good night.
There she
Take
is.
care.
On the other side.
I think her brother was with her.
Good night.
What?
Her brother or somebody was with her over the pole.
Yeah. All right. So those buildings were basically a tinder box.
Who?
Those buildings, yet those billets were a tinder
Yeah.
box. If one room caught on fire, there probably would be a chance of saving the building.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be a chance of
You know,
saving.
the winters over there were real cold.
Yeah, no insulation, thin.
Oh, no. And when it was broken, it stayed that way.
Yeah. One in town was checking all the fireplaces on the ground floor when numbered about 10 fireplaces, seeing that there was no fire hazards about, and generally keeping the coals burning until morning. No fireplaces were active during the daylight hours unless there was someone in constant attendance due to the condition of the wooden buildings and their close proximity to one another. The imminent danger of fire was uppermost in everyone's mind. Luckily, we went through our entire stay as the billets without a single incident of fire. We kept on top of the housekeeping for the express purpose to clear everything that would remotely cause a fire. The condition of the buildings were deplorable, as most of us wondered how the Army could be so cavalier as to let people occupy these buildings. This probably said much for how we rated in the higher scheme of things. We still got our full complement of people, and our leadership function left much to be desired. All the officers and senior non-coms we trained with were gone, and not to attrition, but to their own volition. So all the guys that trained you, all the officers, now you're heading to the
They were sleeping in the heated quarters.
but now you're headed to the front lines shortly, and all the guys that gave you the instructions,
Yeah.
they went back to the United States.
Yeah.
They led back to the United States. I still did not feel really suited or ready for the rigors of combat. We were not cohesive, integral unit functioning as a team. There was much friction and instability among the squads and platoons, and even in the company. Company Droulard, how's Captain Droulard? Captain
Yeah,
Droulard,
well, he's an old guy.
how was he, okay?
Yeah, he's all right, but he's over his age.
Captain Droulard was aloof and incapable of instilling the men he commanded any semblance of leadership or unit cohesion. The other officers were non-existent. They would obtain one or two. They did not last long for various reasons. The men themselves were mostly divided between ASTP, Air Corps, and regular draftees and enlisted Ds. Naturally, ASTP and the Air Corps were elite, and they always looking for that special privilege and non-toiling assignment. I do not believe that I could trust my life in their hands, since they're always so self-centered and aggressive in what they believed was their place in the scheme of things. Then you put in parentheses with an exclamation mark, Steve.
Yeah.
Our squad was probably the exception. I thought although both Fink and Lape would be both ASTP, but their personalities and beliefs were the exception rather than the rule. Fink was always an ordinary guy who happened to be fortunate to get into the ASTP. He always commented so many times, no big deal, and abided by that maxim. Lape, on the other hand, while not flaunting his good fortune to be in the ASTP, displayed a strong affinity for believing he was superior to the rest of us. He would always try to intelligize every facet of our existence, and the only thing that would keep him in check was his constant foul-ups and constant and complete ineptness at soldiering. The rest of the squad were draftees, usually apathetic and forlorn. They did what they were told, but they did not relish that they were doing, and only looked for the day when they would be out of the army and the war. I never discussed these issues with anyone, primarily since I believed it would be no good. Minutes?
8.
8?
8.
But we would antagonize certain individuals and make them even more rigid in their performance. I felt this was every way since coming into the 75th, and with a short experience with the 106th. Well, you're glad you got out of that 106th.
Why?
You were in a short experience with the 106th. You were.
What did it say?
It said, I felt this way ever since coming into the 75th, and with the short experience you had with the 106th. I only felt.
What do you mean, Royal Six?
Weren't you in the 106th for a while? Weren't you in the 106th Division for a while?
Royal Sixth?
Yeah.
There was no Royal Sixth.
Well, it says right here.
106th.
106, yeah.
Yeah, 106.
I felt it more strongly, and at one time I thought seriously of transferring into a special unit where they would be all volunteers who would consequently display more team spirit. But like much of what I deliberated, I never did anything substantial about it. There was posted on a company billboard, forthcoming dance at the local canteen, British for USO. No passes would be issued, since the only requisite was that you sign in and sign out at the orderly room before leaving. So you didn't have to get a pass, you just had to go.
Yeah.
Okay. The orderly room was in headquarters platoon building, several streets away from our shower area. We made it convenient to shave and shower, sign in, and take in the sights of the town without any extra hassle of riding buses for hours as we did in Breckenridge. Granted, the walk was somewhat a nuisance, but it was well worth it. For the hot shower, we could partake of it. It was one of the few things in which the Army had proven itself quite capable of achieving. The canteen was a former auditorium of sorts, situated on the opposite end of town, approximately 1.5 miles from our billets. It was easy to find, and we had only had to go down to Milford Road, to Merlin Road, and then turn left on Freeman's Way until we came to Howells Avenue. The auditorium sat at the end of Howells Avenue. Considering the size of the town, 35,000 population, the canteen and dance floor were rather large. The dance floor was in the center of a large room with space for an orchestra to one side. Along the outer wall was clustered small tables and chairs, and at the other end of the wall was a U-shaped bar, which served warm English beer, sodas, tea, biscuits, and cookies. Did you ever try the warm English beer? Did you ever try the warm English beer?
The what?
Did you ever try the warm English beer?
Warming?
Warm English beer. Did you ever try it?
I don't know, what do you mean warming?
You say in your book at the dance they served, amongst other things, warm English beer.
Warm beer?
Yeah,
No, Liveys they drink warm beer, yeah.
they drank it warm.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But you never got involved in that.
I don't get into that stuff, no.
Okay, all right. The other wall was encompassed by the entrance clothes checking area and presumably the chatting area, where you greeted your escort or got acquainted with one. As Fink, Lape, and I entered, there was already many GIs mingling about with some RAF and British soldiers. Did you get along fine with the RAF and the British soldiers at these dances?
Yeah, we didn't mix with them, no.
Okay.
They were on one side of the field, we were on the other.
Okay. What struck us as gratifying was the abundance of females, all young and somewhat attractive in their British attire. I thought of Anne and felt somewhat self-conscious as I looked about the collection of young women. Fink began to circulate, and Lape kept following me.
3 minutes.
And Lape kept following me as I wandered about, while the band struck up another trio of tunes. The girls were well-mannered and reserved, as the British are noted for. As I walked about, I was greeted with, "Hello, Yank," or just hello, never a hi. The girls were all from several nearby villages, and they all seemed very pleased to be here among strangers from another country.
Well, they were in the service.
Yeah. As I stood and watched the dancing, Lape kept on persisting me to start circulating and make some contacts. I ignored his persistence since I had no intention to actually dance with someone. I felt that it was I thought that as if I was engaged, and this was forbidden and a precept of Anne's and my relationship. The band took a short break, and Lake and I walked over to the bar to take our first English beer. Your first English beer. It was flat, and worst of all, it was warm.
Yeah.
After several sips, I laid the glass down and walked away. Lape thought it tasted great and had another. He followed me about, so Lape is following you all around this dance. Lape is following you.
Yeah.
He followed me about, glass in hand, eyeing all the girls as we passed them. I did not particularly notice anyone, but thought of Anne and how our first dance together. I did compare Anne
1 minute, 37 seconds.
I did compare Anne with the girls here, and I thought there was no comparison. Anne had them beat by a mile. The band struck up again. It was a familiar hokey pokey. Lake and I walked over to the dance floor and watched the GIs dance the hokey pokey with the British lassies. As we stood there watching, someone tap me on the shoulder. As it turned out, there was a girl smiling at me and asking me if I cared to dance. Before I could form a reaction, I said yes, smiled back to her, and led out to the dance floor. I'm no great dancer, and the ins and outs of the hokey pokey had me going in every which way, much to the joy and pleasure of my female companion. She seemed to enjoy anticipating my missteps and following through with her correct sequence. It was a beginning to enjoy myself and fell into the mood of music, trying to stay with the music at the same time get acquainted with my newfound friend. We had a little time for small talk, and it took all my powers of concentration for my dancing, following my companion and still trying not to be too clumsy and left-footed about. Finally, when the number was completed, I escorted her to the bar for something to drink, and we both agreed on soda. As we sat
Rapid.
As we
Right.
sat at the
5
tables,
seconds.
she told me her name was Jean.